What's up, everybody? Welcome to day 23 of our 24 days to Christmas countdown. Tonight, we will be reading through Luke chapter 23. As you guys know, we have been reading through one chapter in the book of Luke each night leading up to Christmas Eve. So after tonight, we just have one more night to do this. And so I'm excited to be here with you tonight for Luke chapter 23. So as you guys come on into the room, I see a few of you starting to roll in now. Go ahead and drop a note in the comments and let me know you're here. Say hello. For those of you who are coming around later, watching on the replay, be sure and give me a hashtag replay. I know there are a lot of people, it being just 2 days to Christmas, we have a lot of people that are out and about doing their last minute errands. I made the mistake of trying to go to the store today to pick up a couple things I needed, and I was like, whoo. They didn't have half the stuff I needed. They were out. I was like, oh, well, I guess everybody's already gotten it. Hey, Kelly, good to see you. Merry Christmas Eve to you as well, my friend. Nice to see you here tonight. But the streets are busy out there, so I am I tried to stay in today, but I did need a few things, so I ventured out and was happy to get back home. Let me just say it that way. I was happy to get back home. But so I'm going to, because I know everybody's like super busy and has a lot going on, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in and start reading tonight, and we'll see where it takes us, and then we'll go from there. So give me just a minute to pull up my screen share. Y'all know how it goes. You know the routine. I see a few more people hopping into the room. Go ahead, drop a note, say hello, let me know you're here, and here we go. Now I will say Luke 23 is going to take us down a somber road tonight, but remember, this is not the end of the story. But it is the reason Jesus came. So let's honor it by reading through it tonight. Okay. All right. Luke 23. Jesus before Pilate. The entire council stood at once and took Jesus to Pilate, the Roman governor. They accused him of false testimony, saying, "This man tells us not to pay our taxes to Caesar, and he proclaims himself to be Christ, the King and Messiah. He's a deceiver of our nation." Pilate asked Jesus, "Is this true? Are you their King and Messiah?" Jesus answered, "It is true." Pilate turned to the high priest and to the gathered crowd and said, "This man has committed no crime. I find nothing wrong with him." But they yelled and demanded that Pilate do something, saying, "He has stirred up our nation, misleading people from the moment he began teaching in Galilee until he has come here to Jerusalem." When Pilate heard the word Galilee, he asked if Jesus was a Galilean. And when they told him yes, Pilate saw a way out of his problem. He knew that Antipas, son of Herod, ruled over Galilee, and he happened to be in Jerusalem at that time. So Pilate sent Jesus to Antipas. So Pilate, he really didn't want to have to deal with this because he didn't really see or find anything wrong with Jesus. And so he was, it said here in the verses that he saw, when he heard that Jesus was Galilean, he saw a way out. So he was trying to pass the buck on this one and not have to make a decision. But and so he sent him over to Herod. But here's the thing, Herod was like a fan. So let's watch what happens. A fan of Jesus, I mean. When he saw Jesus, he was elated, for he had heard a great deal about his ministry and wanted Jesus to perform a miracle in front of him. Antipas questioned him at length, but Jesus wouldn't even answer him. All the while, the high priests and religious leaders stood by, accusing Jesus of wrongdoing, so that Antipas and his soldiers treated him with scorn and mocking. Antipas put an elegant purple robe on Jesus and sent him back to Pilate. That day, Antipas and Pilate healed their long-standing feud, and they became good friends. So, it says here, and let me just read this first part again. All the while, the high priests and religious leaders stood by, accusing Jesus of wrongdoing, so that Antipas and his soldiers treated him with scorn and mocking. So they were mocking of Jesus, and Antipas probably got a little butthurt that Jesus didn't do what he expected or wanted him to do. Because at first, remember, it said he was elated or excited to see Jesus because he had heard so many great things about him. But when Jesus wouldn't, you know, entertain him, I guess, then he moved over to the side of mocking him and scorning him and things like that. But again, Antipas didn't see anything wrong with him outside of the accusations that people were throwing. And so he sent him back to Pilate. And let's see what happens after that. So Pilate gathered together the people, the high priest, and all the religious leaders of the nation. He told them, "You have presented this man to me and charged him with stirring a rebellion among the people. I have examined him here in your presence and have put him on trial. My verdict is that none of your charges against him are true. I find no fault in him." Then I sent him to Antipas, son of Herod, who questioned him and found him not guilty. Since he has done nothing deserving of death, I have decided to punish him with a severe flogging and release him. For it was Pilate's custom to honor the Jewish holiday by releasing a prisoner. So Pilate is still like, I don't see anything wrong with this guy. So, there's this tradition of him releasing one prisoner. So he's deciding. He said, I have decided I'm just going to flog him and release him. But what happened? When the crowd heard this, they went wild, erupting with anger. They cried out, "No, take this one away and release Barabbas." For Barabbas had been thrown into prison for robbery and murder. Pilate, wanting to release Jesus, tried to convince them it was best to let Jesus go, but they screamed out over and over, "Crucify him, crucify him." A third time, Pilate asked the crowd, "What evil crime has this man committed that I should have him crucified? I haven't found one thing that warrants a death sentence. I will have him flogged severely, and then I will release him." So he's still not seeing anything wrong. Like they're asking for Barabbas, a murderer and a thief, to be released to them, and Pilate's still saying, no, I don't see anything wrong with this guy. There's nothing he's done that would merit crucifixion. So I'm going to flog him and release him." Again, the people, they continued. But the people and the high priest shouted like a mob, screamed out at the top of their lungs, "No, crucify him, crucify him." Finally, their shouts and screams succeeded. Pilate caved in to the crowd and ordered that the will of the people be done. Then he released the guilty murderer Barabbas, as they had insisted, and handed Jesus over to be crucified. As the guards led Jesus to be crucified, there was an African man in the crowd named Simon from Libya. He had just arrived from a rural village to keep the feast of the Passover. The guards laid Jesus' cross on Simon's shoulder and forced him to walk behind Jesus, carrying his cross. Massive crowds gathered to follow Jesus, including a number of women who were wailing with sorrow over him. Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. You should be weeping for yourselves and your children. The day is coming when it will not be the women with children who are blessed, but those who are childless. Then you will say the barren women are the most fortunate. Those who have never given birth and never nursed a child, they are more fortunate than we, for they will never see their children put to death. And the people will cry out for the mountains and hills to fall on top of them, to hide them from all that is to come. For if this is what they do to the living branch, what will they do with the dead ones? The guards led away 2 criminals with Jesus to execute all 3 at the same time. When they came to the place that is known as the skull, the guards crucified Jesus, nailing him on the center cross between the 2 criminals. While they were nailing Jesus to the cross, he prayed over and over, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." The soldiers, after they crucified him, gambled over his clothing. A great crowd gathered to watch what was happening. The religious leaders sneered at Jesus and mocked him, saying, "Look at this man. What kind of chosen Messiah is this? He pretended to save others, but he can't even save himself." The soldiers joined in mockery, offering Jesus a drink of vinegar. Over Jesus' head on the cross was written an inscription in Greek, Latin, and Aramaic. "This man is the King of all the Jews." And all the soldiers laughed and scoffed at him, saying, "Hey, if you're the King of the Jews, why don't you save yourself?" One of the criminals hanging on the cross next to Jesus kept ridiculing him, saying, "What kind of Messiah are you? Save yourself and save us from this death." The criminal hanging on the other cross rebuked the man, saying, "Don't you fear God? You're about to die. We deserve to be condemned. We're just being repaid for what we've done. But this man, he's done nothing wrong." Then he said, "I beg of you, Jesus, show me grace and take me with you into your everlasting kingdom." Jesus responded, "I promise you, this very day you will enter paradise with me." It was now only midday, yet the whole world became dark for 3 hours as the light of the sun faded away. And suddenly in the temple, the thick veil hanging in the holy place was ripped in two. Then Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Father, I surrender my spirit into your hands." And he took his last breath and died. Like I said, it's a little bit of a somber reading for this time of year, but let's remember that this is why he came. Christmas, we're celebrating his birth. We're celebrating the birth of Jesus, but he came to earth with a purpose, not just to come. He came with a purpose, and this was the purpose for which he came. And it was to usher in the restoration of relationship between God and man. And the significant thing about this particular part that we just read, right before Jesus took his last breath and died, is that right before that happened, or even before that could happen, the connection between God and man had to be restored first. And that's what happened the moment that the veil hanging in the holy place was ripped in two. So see here how it says, "And suddenly in the temple, the thick veil hanging in the holy place was ripped in two." Now, the reason that matters is because that veil was what separated God from the people. And the only person that could go behind that veil at very specific times of the year for very specific reasons was the high priest. Jesus is the high priest, the ultimate high priest. So when Jesus went behind that veil, He ripped it down so that God could now be in the midst of his people again. So that's the kind of the significance of that restoration, and that connection between God and man was reestablished. And at that point, Jesus took his last breath and he died, because that was the first step to bringing salvation to mankind, bringing healing to the relationship between God and man. So, somber as it was necessary, and it had to happen so that we can have that one-on-one. We can now go into that holy place, and we can have that relationship with God that before was only allowed for the high priest, and it was only allowed at certain times of the year for specific purposes. The intimacy between God and man wasn't there since Adam. So now that this has been done, that opportunity is being restored to mankind. That is something to celebrate and be happy about. Let's keep reading. When the Roman captain overseeing the crucifixion witnessed all that took place, he was awestruck and glorified God, acknowledging what they had done. He said, "I have no doubt we have just killed the righteous one." He was a Roman. He was a Roman, and he could recognize that Jesus was the righteous one, that Jesus was the Messiah. He was Roman. That means he wasn't Jewish. He didn't even really believe in the same God. Romans had lots of gods. So that's pretty telling that even the Roman soldier recognized him for who he was at that moment. The crowds that had gathered to observe this spectacle went back to their homes, overcome with deep sorrow and devastated by what they had witnessed. But standing off at a distance were some who truly knew Jesus, and the women who had followed him all the way from Galilee were keeping vigil. There was also a member of the Jewish council named Joseph from the village of Ramah, which is also Arimathea, a good-hearted, honorable man who was eager for God's kingdom to appear. He had strongly disagreed with the decision of the council to crucify Jesus. He came before Pilate and asked permission to take the body of Jesus for a proper burial, and Pilate granted his request. So he took the body from the cross, wrapped it in a winding sheet of linen, and placed it in a new, unused tomb chiseled out of solid rock. It was preparation day, and the Sabbath was fast approaching. So this was like the day before the Sabbath, and in the Jewish culture on the Sabbath, they're not allowed to do any work. So they had to take care of Jesus's body on this day before the Sabbath set in. And the Sabbath didn't start at sunrise, it started at sunset. So the Jewish day goes from sunset to sunset, not sunrise to sunset. So they were kind of in a hurry to get this done. And luckily, Joseph was there and had a tomb nearby. He went to Pilate. Pilate agreed to let him take the body of Jesus, and they did that. So it goes on here, the women who had been companions of Jesus from the beginning saw all of this take place and carefully contemplated how the body was laid in the tomb. Afterward, they returned home and prepared fragrant spices and ointments, and were planning to anoint his body after the Sabbath was complete, according to the commandments of the law. So that's what I was just explaining. So Friday at sunset is when the Sabbath begins until Saturday at sunset. So once they got his body in the tomb, they would not be able to go and anoint the body until after the Sabbath ended, which would have been Saturday at sunset. or probably more like Sunday morning, because in that culture also, it wasn't really permissible and still isn't to this day. It's still uncommon for women specifically to be out after dark. So Sunday morning would be the first time really they would be able to go back and anoint the body of Jesus. Oh, that's it. That's the end of the chapter. What? So that's the end of the chapter. Chapter 23. We'll finish it up. We'll finish up the story tomorrow. But Sunday's on the way. It's kind of interesting that this is Christmas and leading right up to Christmas Eve, the way the story is unfolding, where Christmas Eve we're going to end up reading the Easter story, right? Which I think is kind of cool. So that'll be fun to do tomorrow, and it'll be appropriate for our special communion time that we're going to do after our reading tomorrow evening to take in. Yeah, Kelly, I love that. I love that too. Sunday's on the way. Don't be sad about Friday, because Sunday's on the way. And Sunday's going to be good. It's going to be good news. So we're going to close this out here tonight, and then we'll come back tomorrow for the final day in our 24 Days to Christmas countdown, and we'll read what happens next. Don't worry, Jesus isn't going to stay in the tomb. And I think it's cool that we're going to get to see him come out on Christmas Eve, and kind of celebrate the fulfillment of why he was born in the first place. So don't forget, bring your communion elements tomorrow, whether if you got juice and crackers or wine and bread, or even if it's water and a wafer, whatever you have, just bring something to represent the body of Christ, like a cracker, a piece of bread or something, and something to represent the blood of Christ. So juice, wine, water, whatever you have, and it will be awesome. Okay. You're welcome, Kelly. It's my pleasure. It's been a fun 23 days, and we'll wrap it up tomorrow. And just a reminder, I know you guys know this, but this and all of these broadcasts are dedicated to the loving memory of my mother and father, Sonny and Joanna Abbott, who are spending their first Christmas together in heaven with Jesus. And so I just bless them and say, Merry Christmas, Mom and Dad. And I say, Merry Christmas to all of you. We'll see you back here tomorrow evening. We'll plan for 8 p.m. We'll plan for 8 p.m. And if the time changes, I'll let you know. I'll make a post. I feel like it should be earlier. I'm gonna bounce it back. I'm gonna say 6. We'll plan for 6 p.m. Okay, 6 p.m. tomorrow for our day 24 and our communion time. And if you can't be here live because of other obligations, then no worries. You can always catch the replay. All right, take care, everybody. God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow, 6 p.m.